Hi, I'm Mary Mance, creator of Twisted Yarns. If you've been practicing using the garter bar to knit the garter stitch, you may make the ridge stitch too, just faster. The ridge stitch is also known as the Quaker Stitch or Ridgeling Stitch, but no matter what you call it, it is quite bouncy. As you knit, ridges form, hence the name. While the ridges add texture, they also tend to spring back together, which makes the stitch a keepsake for your repertoire. In part 3 of this video series, I will demonstrate the ridges stitch using the KrisKrafter Garter Bar on the LK150. And just for fun, I sprinkled tips throughout the video. In the land of machine knitting, the difference between the ridge stitch and the garter stitch is how often you turn the knitting with the garter bar. While the garter stitch is turned every row, the ridge stitch can be turned at practically any interval. However, there are a few considerations, as you will see. So let's start exploring the ridge stitch. Let's work through our first example so you know how it is constructed. I'm going to put my carriage in knit in both directions, so it's going to knit this way and knit this way. And I'm just going to knit some stockinette stitch. And I have 8 rows of stockinette, and now I'm going to turn it. Drop my plate in place. Do the exact same thing that I did before. And this is called a ridges or a ridging stitch. It's also called a Quaker stitch. So I'm going to pull this work off, just like I did before. Push and open. So the turning process is the same. Take your, unthread your carriage. Today I've got it, there we go. Unthread your carriage. Turn your knitting. Put it in place. The techniques that you learned on the garter stitch are the exact same techniques that you will use for the Quaker stitch, or what they call the Ridgeling stitch, or the ridges stitch. Okay? And you're going to make sure that you're past it and you just turned. We'll push this back just like before. Now this time you have to be careful of the settings on your carriage. This row must be a pass, a free pass. So I'm going to free pass over. Then I'm going to immediately switch it back into knit, thread up my machine, and since I did 8 rows here, I'm going to do 8 rows now. Then okay, now I'm on this end. How interesting is that? But you can turn your work from this side also. So I'm going to unthread my machine. Just get it out of the way for a second so I have it for later use. Use my stopper to pull out the needles and drop that plate right to stabilize. Use my garter bar to push back, flip it over. I've opened all my latches by pushing those stitches over them and bringing my knitting off to the side. Push back to open the latches and turn the work. In this example, we achieved wide textural stripes by reversing the stockinette stitch after 8 rows and turning our work. When you turn the knitting, you also need to take 1 free pass. So to make 1 ridge, you have to move the carriage 9 times. That means you will alternate on which side you start the knitting, first on the right, then on the left, then on the right, and so on. This also means you need to change the settings on the carriage more often from hold to knit or from knit to hold. Some people may find this difficult to get into a rhythm. If this is the case, try knitting the ridge stitch with working 7 or 9 rows of knitting, then taking one free pass. That way, you always start the knitting from one side and the free pass from the other. And you set one lever to hold and the other to knit and be on your way. As you can see, there is a slight curl on the edges. Generally, anything over 12 rows may begin to curl on the edges dramatically. When you go that first free pass, you must be in hold. Flip over, thread up your machine. Now, if you do only, say, an odd number of rows, then your free pass will always start from the right. So let's do 3. 1, 2, 3. And the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you something special. I can use my plate to pull it out, drop it down, push these back, flip over my hook, move my knitting off, move these latches back and open them up and lift off the garter bar. Unthread the machine, turn the work around, bring them back here and drop them back down. So I'm only doing 3 rows in between. I'm going to slide that back, pull my yarn out of the way, take my stopper off, and I'm still in hold. So I'm going to knit 3. Now, I didn't flip it back after that. 1, that's my free pass, because everything's in hold position. Now I'm knitting this way, and it's going to return it to work position. Because they're in work position, and I'm on hold, it will still knit. 2, 3. So I have 3 more. And I'll continue to do this for a little bit, but with an odd number of rows that are actually knitting, you will always start from the right-hand side, unless you started at the left, that is. We worked 3 rows of knitting, then turned and took our free pass. Overall, it is much easier to track. As you can see, when less rows of knitting are worked before turning, the springier the ridge stitch. Turned on its side, it can make quite a nice substitute for ribbing. I have one extra tip for you too. If you take and hold some of your knitting off on the garter bar and plan to leave it for a few days, use a piece of painter's tape to secure it. Just cut a piece to length and apply half to one side and fold the other half over the tips of the garter bar. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. In part 4, we're going to explore increases and decreases using the garter bar. Please take a moment to subscribe and ring the bell to receive notifications of upcoming videos. Happy machine knitting!